They said she hung herself. A rope. A chair. A locked room. Case closed. 3. But when Bumpy Johnson stepped into the funeral, he didn't look at her face. He lifted her chin. And in front of 400 silent witnesses, Bumpy saw something the police missed. 2 marks on her neck. One from a rope, the other from hands. That's when Bumpy Johnson whispered the words that signed several men's death warrants. This wasn't suicide. They said it was suicide. That was the word moving through Harlem before the sun even set. A woman. A rope. A locked apartment. The kind of ending police liked, because it asked no questions and caused no trouble. By the time most people heard her name, the report was already written. But Harlem had its own way of listening. And the streets whispered back that something didn't feel right. Her name was Evelyn Carter, not famous, not rich, just visible enough to be dangerous. She lived quietly, paid her rent on time, kept her head down. 3. Too quiet for someone who suddenly decided to die in the middle of the afternoon. Too careful to leave behind loose ends. By nightfall, the story reached Bumpy Johnson. It didn't come with drama. No breathless phone call. Just a few calm words passed through the right mouth. They say she hung herself. Bumpy didn't react. No anger. No curiosity on his face. Just stillness. The kind that made men stop talking mid-sentence. After a long pause, he spoke. "Don't touch the body." That was all. The funeral was arranged quickly. Too quickly. Another detail that didn't sit right. In Harlem, grief usually took its time. This one felt rushed. Like someone was afraid of what people might notice if they looked too long. The funeral parlor filled early. By the time the doors closed, nearly 400 people were inside. Numbers runners. Bar owners. Old men who remembered Harlem before the lights. Women who knew how to survive without asking questions. Nobody cried. Nobody spoke. The air felt heavy, not with sadness, with suspicion. Then Bumpy arrived. The room changed the moment he stepped in. Conversations died. Eyes followed him without turning heads. He didn't wear a flashy suit. Didn't need to. Power walked in with him, quiet and absolute. He moved straight toward the coffin. No hesitation, no greeting. The lid was already open. Evelyn lay still, her face made peaceful by careful hands. Whoever prepared her had done a good job. Too good. They wanted her to look calm. Innocent. Finished. Bumpy stood over her for a long moment. He didn't look at her hands. Didn't look at her face. He looked at her neck. Slowly, almost gently. He reached out and lifted her chin with 2 fingers. Time stretched. People leaned forward without realizing it. The room held its breath. There it was. The rope mark was there, sure. Thick, obvious. Exactly where it was supposed to be. But beneath it, slightly darker, slightly older, was another line. Thin. Horizontal. Not the mark of a noose pulling upward. The mark of pressure, side to side, hands. Bumpy's fingers didn't move. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened, like steel settling into place. He let her chin fall back gently, stepped away. For a moment, nobody spoke. Not even the air seemed to move. Then Bumpy said it, quiet enough that only the front row heard. This wasn't suicide. The words didn't echo. They sank. Men glanced at each other. Women swallowed hard. Someone near the back crossed themselves. Everyone knew what those words meant. Not just for Evelyn, 3. For the people who thought they could hide behind paperwork and rope. Bumpy turned slowly, scanning the room. He wasn't looking for the killer. Not yet. He was looking for fear, and he found it. One man wouldn't meet his eyes. Another shifted his weight too fast. A third slipped out before anyone noticed. Small things. Tells. Bumpy remembered every one of them. He didn't raise his voice, didn't promise revenge. He didn't need to. Because in Harlem, when Bumpy Johnson said something wasn't suicide, it meant the story was just beginning. And somewhere out there, the men who staged that hanging were starting to understand one terrible truth. They hadn't fooled the police, 3. But they had insulted Bumpy Johnson's intelligence. And that, 3, was the kind of mistake people didn't live long enough to explain. The morning after the funeral, Harlem felt different, not louder, not quieter, just tense. Like the city itself was waiting for something to break. Bumpy Johnson didn't sleep much that night. He didn't need to. His mind was already working through details the police had rushed past. Suicide scenes were supposed to be simple. This one was crowded with mistakes. He started with the body. Not officially. Officially, the case was closed. But in Harlem, closed only meant the right doors had been paid to shut. One of Bumpy's men visited the morgue before noon, calm, respectful, asking nothing that sounded like a threat, just looking, just listening. The coroner didn't say much, but his hands did. They hesitated when lifting the sheet. They lingered on the neck a second too long. That told Bumpy everything. Rope burns fade a certain way. Bruises don't. The discoloration beneath Evelyn's rope mark was older, deeper. The kind that came from pressure cutting off breath before the rope ever touched skin. Someone had squeezed first. Hard, long enough to panic her. Long enough to leave truth under the lie. Then Bumpy turned to the apartment. The landlord had found the body. Or so he said. But his timeline didn't sit right. He claimed he heard nothing. No struggle. No noise. In a building where walls carried arguments like gossip, he said he waited before calling police. Said he needed a moment. People who find suicides don't wait. People who are thinking do. Bumpy didn't confront him. He didn't have to. By late afternoon, word came back. 3. Evelyn hadn't been alone the night before she died. A man had been seen entering her building after dark. Not a stranger. Someone she knew well enough to open the door for. That narrowed things. Then came the first real crack. Evelyn had been talking. Not to police. That rumor was planted on purpose. 3. Talking to cops was the fastest way to get sympathy after a death. It also sent everyone looking in the wrong direction. She was talking to business. The wrong business. A rival crew had been trying to move product through Harlem without Bumpy's blessing. Quiet at first. Careful. They needed protection. Roads, names. Evelyn knew those things. She'd heard too much in rooms where people forgot she was listening. She wasn't threatening anyone. She was negotiating. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was trusting the men she negotiated with. Bumpy sat in his chair as the pieces came together. Not angry. Focused. He hated sloppy work. And this was sloppy from the start. The plan wasn't murder. It was silence. They were supposed to scare her. Maybe choke her just enough to make the point. Leave her breathing. Leave her alive. Then move her out of town. Clean. But fear makes people stupid. Someone lost control. Hands stayed on her throat too long. Panic set in. After that, everything became improvisation. The rope, the chair, the rushed police call, and the payoff. Bumpy knew who to look at next. Not the killers, the helpers. A detective who signed off too quickly. 3. A patrolman who didn't knock on neighboring doors. A report that described marks that didn't exist and ignored the ones that did. That night, one of those men drank alone at a bar on Lenox Avenue. Same stool. Same whiskey. Same routine. 3. He didn't notice the stranger beside him until the glass in front of him was replaced with a fresh one he hadn't ordered. Long day, the stranger said casually. The cop nodded, didn't ask questions. He already knew who the stranger worked for. Words came out fast after that, not confessions. Excuses. He said. He was told it was suicide before he arrived. Said the paperwork was already half filled out. Said he didn't want trouble. Men like that never want trouble. That's why trouble finds them. By midnight, 3. Bumpy had names. Not just the man who squeezed the life out of Evelyn, but the one who gave the order. And the men who cleaned it up. One of them figured it out too late. Before dawn. A man tried to leave Harlem with a suitcase that rattled when he walked. He bought a ticket under a false name. He didn't look back once. But Harlem noticed. By the time the sun rose, Bumpy Johnson was already awake. Already calm, already certain. This wasn't about Evelyn anymore. It was about disrespect. They hadn't just killed a woman. They had lied badly. They had rushed. They had assumed no one would look closely. Worst of all, they had assumed Bumpy Johnson wouldn't notice. And somewhere on a road leading out of the city, a man was about to learn just how dangerous that assumption could be. The man didn't get far. Nobody ever did once Harlem decided to keep its eyes open. He made it to the bus station just after dawn, moving fast but trying not to look like he was running. Hat pulled low, coat buttoned wrong. One small suitcase clutched tight, like it might disappear if he loosened his grip. He kept checking the clock. Then the door, then the crowd, already rehearsing the story he'd tell himself once the city fell behind him. He never heard the footsteps. 2 men flanked him as the loudspeaker called out destinations. Not rough, not rushed. One took the suitcase. The other took his arm, firm enough to guide. gentle enough to avoid attention. To anyone watching, it looked like old friends catching up. He didn't fight. That was his first smart decision of the morning. They didn't take him somewhere dramatic. No basement, no dark alley. Just a quiet room above a closed storefront where the windows stayed shut and the walls didn't care what they heard. He talked almost immediately. Not because he was brave, because he was terrified. He said Evelyn was supposed to be scared, not dead. Said the order was to make her understand, not to silence her forever. Said hands were used because hands didn't leave obvious evidence. 3. Said the rope was an afterthought, something added when panic took over. He said names. He said amounts. He said who paid who and who promised protection. Every word was written down. Every word weighed. Then he said the one thing that mattered most. He named the man who gave the final order. When Bumpy Johnson heard the name, he nodded once. No surprise. He had already guessed. Power left patterns, and this one fit too cleanly. The runner begged after that. Promised loyalty, promised silence. Promised anything that might buy him another sunrise. Bumpy didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence was already doing the talking. The man was released by nightfall. Alive. That confused everyone. Bumpy let him go on purpose. Fear travels faster when it walks. By the next day, Harlem started shifting. 3. A gambling house that kicked up money to the wrong people caught fire after closing hours. No injuries. Just smoke and ash where confidence used to live. A warning written in flame. A shipment that was supposed to arrive never showed. Trucks were delayed. Calls went unanswered. Doors stayed closed. Then a detective was transferred. Quietly. Overnight. No explanation. 3. Just a new desk far away from streets that remembered his face. The man who ordered Evelyn's death noticed all of it. He stayed calm, at least on the outside. He was smart enough not to run. Running meant guilt. Running meant panic. He stayed put, surrounded by men and reassurances, telling himself this was pressure, not judgment. He was wrong. Bumpy didn't want noise. He wanted understanding. The message was simple. Everything you touch can be taken away. One by one, his connections went silent. Phones rang without answers. Meetings were postponed. Money slowed. Allies stopped returning smiles. And still, he didn't speak. That silence sealed his fate. Late one night, a body surfaced in the Hudson. A lieutenant. Loyal, careful, dead. No rope marks. No bruises on the neck. Just water in the lungs and a face frozen in surprise. The city understood. That wasn't revenge. That was punctuation. The man who ordered the killing finally reached out. Not to Bumpy. Never directly. He sent feelers. Apologies dressed up as explanations. Offers disguised as peace. Bumpy ignored them all. He didn't want apologies. He wanted an example. The runner, the one who had talked, heard about the body the next morning. He tried to drink the fear away. He failed. Fear sobers faster than whiskey. He packed again. This time, he didn't make it out of his building. What happened inside was never discussed. The neighbors only heard a chair scrape, a muffled voice, then nothing at all. By the end of the week, Harlem was quiet, not peaceful, alert. Everyone knew what had happened. No one spoke about it openly. That was the rule. Stories lived longer when they were whispered. The official records stayed clean. No murders connected. No cases reopened. But in back rooms and closed-door conversations, the truth settled in. Evelyn Carter hadn't died alone. Her death had cost more lives than anyone could count. And the man who ordered it, he was still breathing. For now. Bumpy Johnson hadn't finished writing the story. Yet. He was just making sure the ending would be remembered. By the time the dust settled, Harlem had learned how to move again. Carefully. Quietly. Like a man walking past a dark alley after hearing one too many stories. The streets were still alive. Still loud with music and money, but underneath it all ran a new understanding. Something invisible, but heavy. The man who ordered Evelyn Carter's death was still alive. That fact alone kept everyone guessing. Some thought Bumpy was waiting. Others thought maybe a deal had been made. In Harlem, waiting was often worse than dying. It left room for imagination. Bumpy Johnson didn't rush the ending. He never did. He let the man sit with the damage first. His name stopped opening doors. His calls stopped getting returned. Old allies found reasons to be busy. New ones kept their distance. Money slowed, then tightened. Power drained quietly, the way blood does when the wound is hidden. No gunshots. No public scenes. Just isolation. The man finally understood what that meant. Without protection, without reach, 3. Without the illusion of control, he wasn't powerful anymore. He was just another man who had made the wrong enemy. When he finally asked for a meeting, it wasn't defiant. It was desperate. The message reached Bumpy late one evening. He listened without expression, then nodded once. He agreed to the meeting, but on his terms. Neutral ground. No crowds. No witnesses who mattered. The room was plain. A table. 2 chairs. A single light that left no place to hide. The man arrived first. He looked smaller than he used to. Older. His confidence had been replaced by calculation. And even that felt forced. When Bumpy entered, he stood out of habit, then sat back down, unsure what respect still bought him. They spoke quietly. The man talked more than he should have. Apologies. Explanations. Promises that came too late. He insisted Evelyn's death was a mistake. That he never wanted her killed. That panic had ruined everything. Bumpy listened. When the man finished, Bumpy finally spoke. "You didn't kill her," he said calmly. "You just ordered it?" The man flinched. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. Not threatening. Just close enough to make sure every word landed. "You didn't think I'd look close." Bumpy continued. "You thought paper and rope would cover it." The man tried to answer. Couldn't. Bumpy stood. "That's the part you don't come back from." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He simply left. The man was alive when Bumpy walked out. That mattered. What happened next didn't need instructions. 3. Bumpy's people understood consequences the way others understood rules. The man wasn't touched that night, or the next, or the one after. Then one morning, his office was empty. No body, no struggle. Just a desk cleared out and a door left unlocked. Some said he skipped town. Others said he was taken somewhere quiet, somewhere names stopped meaning anything. Bumpy never confirmed either. What mattered was the effect. The rival operation folded within weeks. Roots dried up. Protectors vanished. Harlem returned to its balance, fragile but intact. No one tried to move without permission again. And Evelyn Carter. Her case stayed closed. Officially, 3. She was still a suicide, a sad story filed away and forgotten by people who needed clean records. But Harlem didn't forget. They remembered the funeral, the silence, the moment Bumpy lifted her chin. They remembered how fast things changed after that. How fear moved through powerful men like a disease. How lies collapsed when someone finally bothered to look closely. Bumpy Johnson never spoke publicly about Evelyn. He didn't need to. 3. His reputation carried the lesson better than words ever could. Sometimes justice didn't come with handcuffs. Sometimes it came with understanding. And in Harlem, understanding was everything. Years later, people would still tell the story. Not loudly, not in detail. Just enough to warn anyone who thought about staging a lie and calling it truth. They said she hung herself. But Bumpy Johnson knew better. And once he knew, the city itself made sure no one ever made that mistake again. 3. If this story pulled you into the shadows of Harlem, don't forget to like, subscribe, 3, and turn on notifications for more real gangster stories they tried to erase. And tell me this. What if Bumpy had pulled the trigger himself? Would Harlem have feared him more, or respected him less?